episode 60. My name is Dave Hunt, and I'm joined by Michael Swick.
I just realized it's like a happy accident that episode 60 lands on our Game of the Year episode. Nice round number to go and end the year.
And then 61 will be preview of 2021.
Look at that. It's almost like we planned it, and this isn't just being thrown together relatively fast today.
It's all good. Sometimes that's like, I feel like it's our best work is our impromptu work. So.
Oh yeah, I was definitely that student back in school that my best projects were the ones I did the night before.
Wow, you wrote this paper really good. Yeah, it was all fresh in my mind right away, like the last 4 hours ago. Like
no thought, just brain the paper.
All right, so we are Digital Days Gaming. If you're checking us out for the first time, we are a weekly podcast that uploads every Thursday on the podcast services of choice. You can also typically catch us on Twitch. We are taking a little bit of a break from Twitch for the holidays, so we'll be on our weekly show will be live on Twitch in 2021. But it's twitch.tv/Digital Days Gaming. So if you're able to leave us a follow there, if you have Amazon Prime, or if you want to subscribe to us on that channel through direct payment or Amazon Prime, those are all great things that are you're able to use on Twitch. And since we are an affiliate, you can use those subscriptions on us. All of the other show social links and show links are going to be in the show notes. We're not going to go through each one of them individually. We'll cover Patreon briefly at the end, but the main focus of this week's show is Game of the Year for 2020. We're going to go over just kind of the year in review of 2020, and then what we liked and what we really liked, obviously, as in terms of our games of the year. And we'll go over some stories that impacted the entire year. And it'll just so like this one will be a look back, and then next week's episode will be a look ahead, and then we will resume our regular weekly show in January. So just briefly again, for those of you that have been around for the whole year or the year and a couple months that DDG is old now, thank you. It's huge support and appreciative of starting this on November of 2019. Not knowing at all what 2020 was gonna turn into at that time. We hope that we provided you guys with a little bit of, if you're working from home or just that escape from reality, for an hour, 2 hours per week. That's a lot of what video games are for me, and podcasting is for me is just an escape from reality and in a way to de-stress a little bit. And we hope that we provided that for you for the last year, and that you are continuing to listen to us. And if you supported us in any way, sharing the show, tweeting about it, tweeting at us through Patreon, through Twitch, through PayPal, whatever you've decided to do or not to do for us, your listenership is definitely more than enough, and we've seen a continued growth in the numbers, and it is always appreciated. So thank you.
I'm just gonna reiterate what you said, so I just won't say anything because you said it well.
I don't intend to take the thunder away, but it is something that I'm very passionate about as our community, and I know that a lot of times Michael's like, like if you guys, I can see him on camera and he's just nodding along as I go because he's just agreeing with everything I said, and I should get a little better at like letting him say that sometimes. But
also, I'm just kind of used to being streaming live on Twitch, so I'm just like nodding and making faces and being like, yeah, so he's saying the right things. But this isn't live.
So I'm really good at making, telling everybody thank you, but it's something I don't say publicly enough at all, as Michael is very, very good at the show notes and keeping the show kind of on track in terms of what we're talking about, we're not talking about. So I'm going to give it over to him now because he put this entire agenda together, so as he always does, and it's always appreciated. So.
Yeah, just so we can kind of keep the same rhythm that we usually have, we're going to start off with what I thought were the biggest news stories of 2020. And the reason I want to do this is because I think these are 3 stories that happened this year, or 3 like big things that happened outside of COVID that will have an effect on the gaming industry over the next several years potentially. Mm-hmm. So the first one I wanted to talk about, me and Dave were so young and naive in like January 2020, where we were thinking, hey, E3 is going to be fun this year. It's going to be our first E3 as DDG. We're trying to figure out everything. I think we were already looking at Airbnbs.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have to.
And I think,
otherwise you get sent out of
no,
the
but we
boonies.
we were like close of just like, let's just nail this down. Even if we can only do like a day at E3, let's just go for it. But then, as you know, COVID was starting to get more and more rampant, and it hit the U.S., and then E3 was just canceled. And in the cancellation, they were going to do a digital event, which they just ended up canceling. Before this, E3 was being set up to be like completely different this year. It was supposed to be almost more like influencer friendly, of just like installations where it's more about interacting with the people there. It felt like they were trying to make more of a Comic-Con experience as opposed to a press media event. So when it was canceled, it was crazy. But going into it, we had no idea what it was going to be. And if me and Dave would have went, and it happened, there's a chance that we would have wasted a trip if it turned out to be this influencer friendly thing.
I think that I don't 100% agree with what you're saying. I agree with it being the focus of it being on influencers on the show floor. I still think that the stuff that we would see in the meeting rooms and in the some of the concourse area, the concourse of the lower meeting rooms, I think some of that would have still been very, very similar and even more prevalent. I think that there would have been, because I feel like the studios if they're already going to have people there, they might as well show some other stuff. And it would have been just opportunities for us to check out some things, as well as the stuff that Ubisoft does offsite. The stuff that EA does
it would have been
offsite.
more offsite stuff, most likely.
The stuff that the Activision does offsite. And then also the other one that had never really been a point of focus for us before would have been Microsoft stuff that they do offsite, which is a driver shot from the Staples Center. So
just right. It's right across the street, and they just shut down that little street. Because there's no point of having cars drive down it.
I think that in terms of like what the future of E3 will look like from a public standpoint is 100% changing. They'll still be like as an example, like the 505 booth will probably still be on the floor, and they'll still show some cool things that you can play. But then I think the stuff that maybe they don't want to show that typically might have been there and kind of been in like the back corner of a booth, that'll be off-site. That'll be off the show floor, or in a hotel room over, because that seemed to happen a lot more often too. Was like the Marriott, not the Marriott, but one of the hotels that was close. I can't think of the name for it right now. I think it is a Marriott, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a Marriott and a Hyatt.
JW or something.
So it's one of those. Oh yeah, JW Marriott.
Yeah, and that would you would because we played Pacer there. We've had some headphone hands-on headphone interviews and presentations like at E3, but not in the convention center. And I think that you would have seen a little bit more of that going on, because companies would have been like, well, if we're gonna have, might as well just take the stuff there too, just to see kind of what's there. So that's kind of how I think it's going to evolve. I think they're still going to double down on the content creator / streamer presentation, influencer presentation, in terms of like what's going on the show floor. I think you'll see companies similar to like what Shack News do, like a bigger stage presence. I think you'll see Epic do a bigger stage preference where they kind of are almost doing a show. And then, but at the same time, that you'll see the companies that really want their stuff to be shown bring it to those shows. Like, so where Epic will have, or Jeff Keighley would, like, similar to what he's done before, where the companies are at E3 and they come to him and show off their stuff for people to watch from home. And that stuff that they're showing off would be some of the stuff that we actually get to play and then give our own personal impressions on.
Yeah, the E3 is definitely going to change if it comes back, but we'll get to that in a couple minutes. The show floor would be definitely one of those things where the way they were planning the show floor, there is a chance that all me and Dave would have done at the show floor is just walk through it and to spend all of our time in meeting rooms based on what they were talking about. And the show floor already last 2 years has been I think I had one appointment on a show floor. And it wasn't for a video game. It was for like headphones or like a sound bar.
Well, I don't feel like this in years past, like we talked about this. And I think that the year that you were there without me, I think it was like maybe the last year that I feel like that was relevant, because I've always heard this like, well, yeah, I got to walk the floor. And like when I was at E3, Maybe that first year I was there, that they had some Vitas out there and they had some other like
yeah,
where you
Sony
could walk
would
up
have
and
the
play
indie
stuff.
section.
Like that stuff is done, and that's been done for 4 or 5 years. Like you're just not walking around the show floor and walking up to any kind of like display with a TV and a controller, whether it's a Switch controller or a PlayStation controller, an Xbox controller, a keyboard and mouse, and just playing a game. Like that's done, and that's been done for the last couple of years. Yeah,
the only area last year that was really a thing was the indie section.
Yeah.
Which I felt was like way smaller than it's been.
Because they just use the mix now.
Off in a corner. Yeah, they use the mix, which is like hard to get into sometimes, or just really condensed and packed.
But the mix was the only thing that I felt that the last couple of years that I ever went to. And I'm sorry, the mix has been usually at a offsite hotel, like really far away, and far away in LA terms. And then you're going up. There's food, and there's all these like it's on. I don't even know what that. I feel like that was somebody's like office that they rented out, where like it would be a software company's office.
It was a suite.
Yeah, and you'd go into like it would have
skyrise.
some open areas, and it had like a kitchen and a bar section, but then there was also like a bunch of like 20 by 20 rooms that's where there was like table set up, and the companies were there, and they had like a poster and then their TV and a game. And then also they would rent out like the hallway space as you were walking from each room to the other room, like along the perimeter of the suite, that they would have other tables set up with games on there. And that's where you could just walk up, pick up a controller, play a game, and the guy or gal would just start talking to you about the game, and you're like, oh, this is really cool. That on E3 show floor has been over for me for a couple of years.
Yeah, I would feel like my first year, because I have one more E3 than you,
mm-hmm.
and then your first year was probably the last year that you could just walk up to Sega's booth, Microsoft's booth when they had a booth, Sony, and then Nintendo just never really has been doable.
Well, and I think the open to the public part changed a lot of that, because
because you don't want to demo a unfinished game.
Correct.
And then destroy your word of mouth.
Yep.
As opposed to when me and Dave play a game at E3, you go into it knowing that you're gonna have bugs, you're gonna have crashes, and you kind of have like a gentleman's agreement of like
you're looking at potential.
Yeah, you're looking at potential and the pitch that they're giving you. So, do you think there'll be an E3 2021?
Do I think there'll be an E3 2021?
In person?
No. But I think there'll be an E3 2022. Right?
Yeah, I can see 2022. I don't think 2021.
And I don't think 2021 has to do with E3 not being ready. I think it has to do with we're not going to be ready post-COVID.
Yeah, we're not going to be ready post-COVID because there won't be enough vaccines to go around. And 2, they probably could use another year off to plan. I'm hoping the ESA has been planning hard as hell.
Yeah, especially with the extra time.
Yes.
I honestly think that for us, for DDG in 2021, and I don't think I've even said this to you out loud, is I think that PAX in Seattle in September will be the first time that we might even talk about venturing out.
Yeah, that would probably be the closest I can see, like parts of the country opening up to where the idea of going to a gaming event and touching controllers that someone else has touched seems feasible or possible.
But then I'm also at the same time worried that if PAX is one of the first things that's maybe open, to the public and to the press, like what that would look like. And that kind of terrifies me a little bit in terms of like
PAX
how many people would go there. And it's already chaos from what I've seen before.
Yeah.
So either that or, because PAX East is usually like in April. And that's way too soon. I mean, we're at the end of December right now, where I'm not going to PAX East if it's open to the public. Sorry.
Yeah, and I don't see PSX making a comeback in 2021.
No, I don't see PlayStation doing it at all. So
yeah, they don't have to. I could see PSX coming back in a couple years, but I don't see them coming back anytime soon. But yeah, the E3 was the biggest one because it also opened the door. For all of these events, we had like the Summer Games Fest where every publisher, every developer had a streaming event. And Dave, I think you mentioned a lot of just like how many publishers and developers held their own event and were like, why didn't we do this sooner? Or why don't we do this more in the future? Because they can take up the internet for a day, basically. They can dominate the trends and all that stuff. But we saw a ton of stuff this year. though, when we have our next episode of like what to look forward to, even though there was a bunch of weeks where there was like every day was a different publisher streaming, I don't think anything major was announced this year in any of the streams. But it also doesn't help.
It's that console generation gap. It's like that gap of like where one console's ending and another one's beginning, and those lines are even more blurred now. It's like, as we we'll talk about too, of like what it's not. It's like, oh, this is PS5 only. Like that since that line has been blurred so much, it also means that they just freely move, and they don't really have like concrete deadlines of anything like that, which is fine. But in terms of the generation gap between PS4, PS5, Xbox One to Xbox Series not being as pronounced as PS3 to 4, 360 to 1, in terms of what the capability of the games we're doing, it changes that. I mean, we essentially are, for the I guess I'll say kind of quote unquote for the first time as primarily a console gamer, as I feel like currently right now with the PS5 and the Xbox Series is the closest the gap has been between PC gaming and console gaming in a long time.
Yeah, especially like even though PCs have SSDs, having an SSD built into the hardware and being like very important to where consoles can develop around an SSD, because the SSD is guaranteed to be there on consoles. That's the one thing PC's lacking. Developers can't develop for an SSD on PC because there's so many different variances and mechanical drives are not going away. So that SSD is like a huge thing that the new consoles, or current gen, has the ability to finally say like, hey, we're close to PC or better than PC in a certain way. So yeah, I definitely agree with you there. So you basically, because of COVID, do you think we're gonna get a better organized Summer Game Fest, or do you think it'll be like the same sort of thing? Because I feel like it wasn't the best of like the constant streams, because there was definitely some gaps that we had where it's like, why didn't someone just do something this week? And I feel like we still had a like stretches where there was like too much game news in like 1 week.
Yeah,
and then
nothing. I still think, but I think a lot of that has to do with like that was already like planned prior to COVID happening. So they're already like, well, it's already set, like we're doing that, so let's just leave it there because we've got material or whatever. And now I think that whether E3 returns or doesn't return in the next couple of years, I think that companies similar to like Ubisoft with what they've been doing with a couple of Ubisoft Forwards that they did, I think that now they're sitting there in November, December planning second quarter, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter 2021, and they are planning those with Ubisoft Forwards in mind. And therefore, they're starting to strategically put their pieces in place where they're definitely using a chessboard now, whereas I feel like they were putting a board together to play checkers last year. Mm-hmm. So I think that for everything, you'll see, evolving changes. Like just on a personal note from us, again, is I don't expect us to honestly for the next couple of years, and just from a cost standpoint, and I don't really know for sure, I have no knowledge of this, how much this does or doesn't cost, but the ability of what Ubisoft is a great publisher for us, helping us, get exposure, what they were able to do with Immortals for me and Watch Dogs for you, of playing that while sitting at home, like that had to save them money. There's no way the ability of the program that they were using to let us play cost more than flying me or you out to San Francisco, putting us in a hotel, putting on the event, flying us back. Like, there's no way.
Yeah, the only thing that they would probably need to do, and other, I believe CD Projekt Red did this for Cyberpunk, Activision did this for Call of Duty. The only thing I think holding them back is just how many people they had or how many remote PCs they had, right, and demoists that they had at one time. Because like the 2 sessions I did this year for video games was maybe like a 2-hour window where like 20 people played, as opposed to when you go to an event and there could be like 100 people.
Right.
Like I think when I went to that Call of Duty event, it was a couple hundred people.
Yeah.
But that's scaling. That's logistics that they'll have a year to figure out. So before Far Cry 6, if they want to do that again, or before the next Call of Duty, it's just a matter of just logistics, which these companies are really good at that.
And they work something like that works better for us. I love going to San Francisco. Like, I love it. It's fun. I have a blast. I get away from stuff for a little bit. Again, I get a little break from reality, but it wears me the hell out.
You always regret it, especially us. Like, we work retail, so like we usually end up having to go to work. I mean, last time I flew out to San Francisco, I took a red eye home, and then I had to be at work like 4 hours after I landed. Yeah. So that definitely some more online events would be helpful. Though there's a lot of weird things that like companies can fake, as opposed to you seeing it in person, as opposed to them being like, yeah, this is totally, you're connected to a PS4 version of the game. So that stuff could be a little weird. But let's move on before we just talk about E3 too much and how much we kind of miss it. The second biggest story that I put on here, which was one that will definitely have an effect for several years to come, is Bethesda being purchased by Microsoft. I remember how crazy this was. Did I message you that morning, or did you message me?
I think I might have gotten up before you.
Yeah. But like, that was the craziest set of news, and then you find out how much it was sold for. But Dave, I think you're in agreement that this is like one of the biggest things.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it,
in the gaming world.
Yeah, it's because of how far it came out of left field. I mean, we've seen Microsoft over the last couple of years purchase studios, but nobody, like, not a publisher and a studio. And you know, like, this is a corporation that would do its own press conference at E3 the last couple of years. Like, they had enough clout and a big enough library that they could warrant their own stuff. I mean, this would be similar to like if Sony bought Ubisoft at this point in time. I think Ubisoft is, I guess Ubisoft is bigger than Bethesda in terms of, I don't even know now that I'm saying it out loud. Like, they're probably pretty close. I mean,
they're probably pretty close.
In terms of scale,
edging just a little.
Yeah, like, I would get, but like if Ubisoft was to be published, I think this would be like a $10 million acquisition, or it's $10 billion. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it would be a close.
Yeah. But I think that, like, it was a huge thing of like, there's always been rumors and rumblings of like, Microsoft doesn't really want to be in the gaming business anymore. Like, they're not going to want to do this. And then they kind of bought some of the other small studios, and they're like, oh, well, they're just trying to, like, just bite it out. And then they just bought a whole building. So it's fascinating. And, and as we've talked about at length, and I've had Twitter conversations with people, their business plan is Game Pass. Game Pass, Game Pass, Game Pass, Game Pass, Game Pass, Game Pass. They don't care whether it's on a phone, on a computer, on a console, on an old console, on whatever. And the rumors are that, Spencer's been talking like what I was hoping for is like some kind of app-driven function on a television. So they don't even care if you own a console. They just want you to play their game, and they want you to have Game Pass. And that's what they're doing. And right now, it looks like it's working. Are they hemorrhaging money? I mean, we never really talked about it, but there's been that article a couple weeks ago. I don't know if you saw it, where Phil Spencer was kind of saying, we really haven't quite figured out how to pay these publishers yet. And we don't really know what we are or aren't going to do. And I think that's life. And that's where they're at right now. It's like, I would expect that they gave Bungie more money to have Destiny 2 than they gave to have Dead Cells on Game Pass. As an example, Dead Cells is great, but I think there's a different conversation with an independent developer of Bungie's magnitude versus the developer that made Dead Cells or
other
like games that are
speaking of Game Pass, is like they have a bunch of Sega games, they have all the Yakuza games.
Yep.
Money, I would probably say the Bungie deal for just Destiny 2 and its DLC probably cost them more than it did to have all the Yakuza games on Game Pass, just based on like name and branding. Right. That was interesting because he was just like, it's pretty fluid, it's constantly changing just because they're trying to figure things out. But I remember like having a feeling of not trusting like Microsoft, of like, okay, they're doing Game Pass, cool, how long can they give this a go before they're like, you know what, we're just not making enough money. And I in my head, I'm like, oh, Game Pass, if if it doesn't work out for them, I could see it going away in 2 years. But the Bethesda acquisition, I feel like, is them saying, we're not going away anytime soon because we have a shit ton of money invested now that this is the way to do it. This is your play. This is your Hail Mary of we're throwing this as far as we can, and hopefully it pays off for us.
Yeah, I mean, what they're essentially doing is saying, well, I'll use Halo Infinite as an example. As a consumer, if you want to play Halo, which Halo, whether we believe it or don't believe it, Halo will be a console seller. And I can't rightfully recommend if somebody that I know comes up to me and asks me for a recommendation of, I'm going to get an Xbox because I really want to play Halo. Cool. Get your Xbox and get Game Pass. Like because Halo's on it. And I can't tell somebody in my mind to spend $70 on Halo in September of 2021, November of 2021, when you could spend 10 or 15 bucks a month and play all the Halos in a better resolution, a better frame rate, better load times. And removing any third-party deal that Microsoft has right now, once all of Bethesda's library hits Game Pass, there's a significant library on there of just Microsoft-owned studios, enough to carry it almost by itself.
Yeah, and right now what they're doing is they're trickling into Bethesda stuff because there's so much Bethesda stuff that they would almost be silly to drop
I've never played Dishonored, and I'm just gonna wait because it's gonna be on Game Pass. Like now I'm just gonna wait. It's gonna be on Game Pass, and or any of the Dooms, or if I want to check out or dabble in a Fallout game to decide if I want to play the next Fallout game or whatever Star Citizen's gonna be, I'm just gonna wait. And I'm going to get the Game Pass subscription, and I'm still waiting. I haven't really played very many things on Game Pass on my Xbox the last, 2 months, to where my wife's like, are you going to play that $300 thing that we had to have? And it's one of those things where in January, when something comes out of left field, I'm like, oh, cool. And I'll play it, and I won't have to worry about it. I tweeted this a couple weeks ago. Like, I'm at the state right now where whatever trailer hits the internet randomly in the next 6 months, cool, I can play it. Wherever you're going to show it, I can play it, unless you do a Stadia exclusive.
You don't have to play,
which I can do that on my PC. So.
Yeah, but you don't have to play the fanboy game of like, ooh, competition announced something, let me compare it to something that I can actually play, or let me find a flaw in it so I can justify me not playing that game.
Nope, if I see it and I like it, I can play it, and that's a feeling I haven't had in a long time. Yeah,
and like Bethesda is kind of on like a downswing in terms of like the last couple games they put out, but them being, in the Xbox family on Game Pass is going to make me be like, you know what, I will give the next Fallout a try because it'll just be there.
But we know in the next 12 months, and I know I'm taking a reach here, but I feel like you loved Fallout New Vegas, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the first thing I downloaded on my Xbox Series X because it's on Game Pass.
In 3 or 4 months, though. Oh, it's already on Game Pass. I didn't even know that. But I'm saying in 3 or 4 or 6 months, when they sit there and say, we're doing a cleanup of New Vegas, and it's going to be 4K HDR, 60 frames a second, which is probably pretty damn close to now. People are going to play that game again. Turn the server. It's like, I don't even know if it has online. Turn the servers back on. Like,
no, there's no online, but it would definitely get people going.
Right. And I think that's, and then they've like, oh, wow, this is what, Fallout could look like. And then they say Fallout 5, and it's, and now they have, we'll talk about the next story, but now they have Microsoft's money to where they don't maybe have to release a glitchy pile of crap that they have to work on for the next 6 months.
Yeah, but it like just this acquisition makes every Microsoft studio better because it can spread out their games. So we won't have the thing we had the last gen with the Xbox One, where it felt like you went 1 or 2 years without a Microsoft exclusive, like a from Microsoft exclusive, not a bought exclusive. Throwing in Bethesda's 12 studios, I think it was.
Yeah, it's been a long time since Microsoft proper launched a game, like a long time.
It feels like it, yeah. I'm sure we can find like an indie game. Gears Tactics, technically, but that's like a one-off. That's like a small... That's like a double A. Yeah. So adding the 12 studios with a bunch of different franchises that are well-known means that, ideally, like if Deathloop wasn't exclusive for PS5, they could have released that on Xbox, and then the Halo Infinite delay wouldn't be as bad.
Yeah.
Because it'd be like, oh, there's 2 games coming out this year.
Hellblade 2 is in that conversation as well. They start doing the marketing for Hellblade 2. People start talking about it. They hear really good things. They start reading about it or whatever. And like, oh, it sounds like I should really play Hellblade 1. Yeah, you should. Go get Game Pass, play Hellblade 1, and then when Hellblade 2 comes out, you'll have it.
Yeah, it'll just be ready.
It'll just be there.
And then the Xbox app is really convenient to tell you, like, hey, this has been added to Game Pass. Yep. It's like, you want to download it, and you click it, and you're good.
Yeah. So it's just fascinating in terms of the ecosystem that they're building, and it seems like that this was their plan originally with the Xbox One, and the world wasn't ready for it. At least in North America, they weren't ready for it, and it seems like over time, like, do you really think in 2013 or 14, if I would have said, hey, in 2020 we're going to be playing a console without a disc? No way. Like, and now we have consoles without disc drives. Yes, there still are options for you, but there wasn't a PS3 discless or a PS4 discless or an Xbox. Well, there was an Xbox One discless, but and that was a step in an interesting direction. And I, for one, love it. It makes me think more about my decision to buy a game, because I can't just go and pick up reach into the bottom of a bargain bin and buy something, because I have to find the digital code, and when I just pay more attention, I'm like, I don't really need that, and then I wait a little bit and it's on sale.
Yeah, I didn't realize how, like, I don't know if if it's laziness, but like, I've been looking at some games that I have on disc, and I'm just like, I'll just buy the download when it's on sale, just because it's kind of inconvenient, especially like on the PS5. That disc drive is so loud.
Oh, see, I don't know.
Like, the system's so quiet, but that system is so loud when the disc is spinning. Yeah, it's fucking crazy, because I've gotten used to my consoles being silent. Yeah. And then when I do have to play a game with a disc, it's just like, oh my God, why is it so loud? But yeah, but back to the Bethesda thing. This also kind of started a little bit of an arms race. There was already an arms race between everyone trying to buy stuff, between Sony making their acquisitions. I think that's also why EA bought Codemasters recently, and Take-Two was bidding for Codemasters. You have Tencent just buying whatever they can in terms of like minority stakes in studios. So I think the Bethesda one was like the biggest move so far, but Sony, like, with their financial call, like a month or two after this deal closed, or not closed, started, we're like, yeah, we're going to be looking into more studios. And then they bought Insomniac, and then they said they weren't done and they're looking at more studios. So I think this is going to have a domino effect of more studios being purchased. Do I think Microsoft is going to buy anyone else? Probably not. They probably have to close this deal, because this deal technically I don't think closed just yet, just because it's a $7.5 billion deal. So that stuff always takes a while. Some
legalese going on with it.
Oh yeah, there's someone whose job it's been for the last like 6 months of just checking the contracts and making sure everything's good. Yep. But I'm sure Sony has been kicking the tires on more companies. And I wasn't expecting EA and Take-Two to get into a bidding war, which then now means Take-Two has $1 billion that they're not going to have to spend, and they're looking to acquire more.
So scared that they're going to go after Remedy.
I know, right? And it's funny because Remedy like are known for the Max Payne games, and Take-Two owns the Max Payne games. So, yeah, like we're definitely going to see. I mean, more
is Remedy worth more than Codemasters?
I don't know. That's one of
it depends on what Remedy thinks they're worth and what they're willing to go with. It's like
I'm wondering though if like Insomniac is like feeling like they cheapened them, like they sold themselves at too great a deal.
Yeah, but I would be curious. Like, I think that Insomniac's contract is very interesting with Sony in terms of what possibly like Bethesda's, maybe not Bethesda, but like some of the other studios that they bought, like the Hellblade studio. I'm sure that they're like, we own you, like you belong to us, and like I don't know if Sony's going to Insomniac saying we own you, like we, versus like we're partnering with you,
Yeah, or like, hey, like we own the studio, but you guys still have control,
right?
Like you still have
which we've heard about from Naughty Dog and Sony Bend and Sony Santa Monica, of like where they feel like they're kind of like independent studios with upper management versus owners. So
Yeah. The management that has like, hey, so what you doing? As opposed to the management that's like, you're doing this.
Correct.
Like it seems like
which has been Microsoft's
like,
management in the past.
Yeah, and that's why we have had.
If we see Fallout, Halo, then we know there's something going on.
Yeah, if when you start seeing like weird things, I mean, we're already seeing the Initiative do Perfect Dark, but right. When we see like the Hellblade Ninja Theory working on the next Banjo-Kazooie, then we're gonna be like, all right, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Like, all right, let's do the last one, which is technically still breaking, but I feel
I think it's kind of over until later, at least for a couple months, or until in CD Projekt Red's words, it's over December 21st because they leave.
Yeah, no, it's. Man, all right. So, I just put in the notes Cyberpunk 2077's console launch, but it's technically the PC launch as well, because this game was a mess. This is something I don't think I've ever seen since I've been around.
No, because we've
paying attention to
we've seen
video
publishers
games.
Go, hey, our game is hot garbage. We should really take it down. To versus now, Sony's like, we're taking your game off of our store.
Yeah, taking it off the store, and then also retailers being like, you know what? Fuck it, return it. It's opened. We'll just take it, but you only have a couple days. But let's try and follow this chronologically. Cyberpunk was announced 2013 for PC and current gen, which at the time was PS4, Xbox. We've had like every year since then, either a teaser or a trailer behind closed door videos for this game, and it was pretty hyped up. But I started to notice something was up, not only when it was delayed, but the fact that we never got to see the console versions of this game. Mm-hmm. And even a week before, but CD Projekt Red, they finally showed the console versions, and it was a 5-minute trailer where the PS4 version was only showing 2 characters talking, and the PS4 Pro version was in basically an on-rails car chase. And then that was all they showed. Everything else we've seen was just PC. We found out as the reviews were happening, they were only showing the PC version. Like that was the only thing available for reviewers was PC. We also heard some reviewers, like YouTubers, that were told they weren't allowed to use their own footage for their review. They had to use stock footage that they were given. I heard some things about screenshots. They couldn't use official screenshots. So it started to be like, oh, what's going on? Reviews hit, and for the most part, it was well received because it was the PC port of the game or the PC version of the game, and it was weird because no one had the console, no one had it on PS4 and Xbox One, and then finally that information started to trickle out, and it turned out it barely can run on PS4 and Xbox One, which, yes, it's a little shocking. Or yes, it's not too shocking, actually, not too surprising that the old-ass consoles couldn't run it. But at the same time, CD Projekt Red was like, hey, we already made all of our money back day one based off pre-orders.
8 million pre-orders.
8 million pre-orders, which a good chunk of those are going to be on consoles. And it just got worse and worse as more people started to dig into it, and then the Digital Foundries got the game, and we're seeing that the game drops down to 12 frames per second in certain aspects of it, consistently dropping down that low. And it just kept getting worse and worse. The game was buggy, frame rate issues galore, and just a general lack of polish and unfinishedness that we've seen of a game that's been delayed 4 times. This game was originally supposed to come out earlier this year, and then it got delayed to spring, and then it got delayed to fall, and then it got delayed to winter. And it just I've never seen a company lose all the goodwill they've built so quickly than what happened with CD Projekt Red over the last 2 weeks.
Well, they shot themselves in the foot.
Yes, and
in terms of like, oh, we're not going to delay the game anymore, or 2 years ago, like, we'll release it when it's ready. Well, no, you won't, because you didn't.
Yep.
And then they just kind of, there's been reports that they've came out and said, hey, like, we probably spent too much time working on the PC version, didn't pay enough attention to the console version. The crunch that they were going through, and they said they originally weren't going to crunch, and I mean, it just sounds bad. And my oldest son said it today. We were talking about it a little bit. He's like, well, they should have the game wasn't ready. The game was rushed. I'm like, no, it wasn't rushed. You announced it 7 years ago.
Turns out they might not have started developing it actively until 2016, but we don't know, like, because they announced it so long ago. And the fact that at one point, like back in January, they're like, oh yeah, we'll definitely hit our 420 release date or whatever it was.
Well, they said like November of 2019 that the game's done. We're just working on all the other stuff. Like, really? Like,
yeah. And just to find out, like, there's no AI for the cars, really. If you turn around, the cars behind you disappear. Same thing with pedestrians. Like, they don't have routes or anything. Yeah.
It's not truly open world. Like, even my wife has been reading articles about this because it keeps showing up on her timeline. She said that, like, you can go, I guess, and I don't know, but you can go into, like, in a mission, you can go into, like, arcades and play arcade games. But if you go to that set arcade when you're not in an active mission, you can't do anything.
Yeah, there's a lot of instances where, like, the world's, like, open, but it doesn't feel like there's much to do. It's like a very dead world. But, like, just the stuff on the cars, like, when you get in trouble and the cops kind of just come from the ground because, again, there's no car AI. There doesn't seem to be any, like, AI with NPCs much at all. So there's a lot of things that, like, this feels like an open world game from 2012. Did they overshoot, though? Did they think that the stuff that they did in The Witcher, which the bits the bits and pieces that I haven't played The Witcher, shocking, I know, sure, whatever, shoot me. The bits and pieces of watching things from The Witcher, you're not in a downtown city environment. Yeah, it's open world, but it's open world like in the forest, right? Yeah, there are some cities that are heavily populated, but again, it's like villages. There's no skyscrapers, there's nothing crazy happening. There's just a lot of NPCs. But, like, just not only that, but just, like, on a technical side, because PC has the same AI issues because that's built into the game. But even then, like, as someone who's, like, really excited for this game, and I'm, like, 12 hours in, and I'm not having fun because even without the bugs, I feel like this game is really average. Like, the mechanics feel really old. The shooting feels like Fallout. That's not a compliment. And this feels like a game that, even with some of the mechanics feeling like it's out of 2012, it feels like it would have been too late in 2012. Like, this reminds me of Grand Theft Auto 4 more than Grand Theft Auto 5 in some aspects. Like, we've seen this happen before with games where they're in a long development cycle, and when they finally get out of it, you see remnants of when the game started development, of when the game was first announced. Like, The Last Guardian was one of those games where it was in development hell, and some of the mechanics would have been fine when the game first was announced, but it's aged. But luckily, there was enough heart in The Last Guardian to get beyond that, and I just don't know if there's much heart in this, and I feel super bad for the developers. Like, not the management, the developers. I feel bad for the people that have probably been telling management, this game's broken, this game's not ready. And management was like, we need to push this out the door. And now, who knows what's going to happen with everything. But, like, I've been seeing a lot of comparisons to No Man's Sky, but I don't think No Man's Sky was nearly as bad as what we're seeing.
No, I just think that the comparison to No Man's Sky is valid but unfair, because the comparison to No Man's Sky was expectations versus reality.
Yeah.
And this is functionality versus reality.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
And, like, also an indie studio of, like, maybe 20 people.
Yeah. Versus like, The Witcher 3 studio. And The Witcher 3, for a lot of people, is a game of a generation.
Yeah.
So...
Me included.
Yeah. If this is your first time listening to us, we've definitely talked this story to death the last 2 or 3 episodes. So we're not really gonna delve any farther onto that. So those are the 3 biggest things. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, do you think this will have an effect on AAA games in terms of when games are announced and shown?
No,
because I have a feeling this will potentially.
I don't, because we're still coming off the heels of Ubisoft announcing, titling Gods and Monsters, dating it, and then changing the name of it and delaying it a year. On top of,
but that's
showing
like
Far
3
Cry,
years.
What are you talking about? 3 years? They showed Gods and Monsters at E3 2019, a 30-second thing, and said it was coming in February 2020.
Yeah, that's not bad. I'm talking about, will we see a game that's like 8 years out, basically, like the long.
When is Rainbow
ones.
Six Quarantine coming out?
It's supposed to be 2021, but
when
I think
is
they
it
need
coming
to
out?
Change their name. Q1, I believe, was the last we heard about that. But I'm talking about like these games that just get announced.
When is Dragon Age coming out?
That's EA, yeah. Like, what we don't know. But I'm hoping though that they see this going on, and
when
maybe
is
games
Horizon
will come
2
out
coming
when they're
out?
finished.
And what platform is it coming to?
That's Sony being fucking idiots with that shit.
But you want me to keep going?
No, but I'm saying like that stuff happened before that was announced before Cyberpunk. But do you see something happening where we know CD Projekt Red is not going to announce The Witcher 4 before they're like damn well ready? But do you think anyone will learn from this in terms of like, hey, maybe we don't announce when we just have a concept?
No.
You think that's doomed to repeat themselves?
What did Ubisoft learn from Bungie about how to do a looter shooter?
Yeah, you have a point there.
What did BioWare learn from Bungie and Ubisoft about how to do a looter shooter?
Okay, so with that stuff, the only thing I can say is sometimes you start work on it and something happens to be happening around the same time that turns out to be better.
We have seen articles of where people were like, in my example, where BioWare went to the management and said, hey, look at what Bungie did and didn't do. We shouldn't do that. Oh, you can't compare ourselves to that. We're not like them. We're better than them.
I think I think what happened with Cyberpunk is going to have a effect on some things, especially this bad. At least maybe like EA can't learn already because they already fucked up and made their announcement 4 years ago, so they can't learn and undo what they did 4 years ago by announcing Dragon Age 4.
Square Enix and the Avengers project.
That was only like 2-3 years. I feel like that wasn't that long. I just don't think we're gonna get like an 8-year thing again. We're not gonna get a Last Guardian again. We're not gonna get like this sort of thing where they show clearly what they have, or they release a game broken.
I don't think CD Projekt Red. I think if you really put a gun to CD Projekt Red's head, figuratively, of course, that Cyberpunk 2077 was going to come out in 2017. Like, I think that's when they wanted it.
And then they just got too ambitious and started to overdo it, or what happened?
I don't know. So
I just don't see a point of announcing that soon, and I can see some companies learning from that. Maybe a CD Projekt Red specifically will learn from that, I hope. But releasing a game with just hoping day one patch, this is how I think it will affect. So CD Projekt Red apparently signed a waiver saying that they will fix most of the bugs with a day one patch. That's what they told Sony and Sony and Microsoft. That clearly didn't happen. I can see Sony and Microsoft being a little more strict with that waiver process of like what can be fixed in a day one patch.
Valid. I mean, it was brought up in our Discord channel this week of like when is it quote unquote safe to play Cyberpunk on PlayStation? Mm-hmm. And I pretty much said when it's listed on the store again. And he's like, Kevin was like, well, there's plenty of other games that are on the PSN store that are just as glitchy as this. And I go, well, sure, but not enough that Sony felt they needed to pull it off their store. Yeah,
there wasn't like a small indie game being
and
broken.
I guarantee you, it was 50-60% CD Projekt Red's fault of saying, "Hey, go seek a refund." Like,
oh no, yeah, and that's why
Sony's
Sony
like,
was just like,
wait a minute, all right, so we're gonna just stop this right now until you're ready to fix it. Like, and the way that you're gonna stop it is that you're not gonna sell it on my store.
Yeah, because it's just they're just shooting themselves in the foot of just like selling this thing that there's no one's broken and that will come back for a refund. I also think this put a spotlight on like Sony's refund policy because it wasn't that hard for people on Xbox, wasn't that hard for people on Steam to get refunds.
Which is why I think Sony pulled the plug first.
Yeah, because they didn't want to have this discussion.
I had okay, maybe you can answer this question for me because you might know this. All right, so I buy Cyberpunk digitally on PS4, PS5, whatever, and I seek out a refund. I've downloaded it. I've played it. Can Sony remove that download from my console?
Yes.
To where
I've had a game removed from mine. Yeah.
By the publisher.
No, so you can. It's like you can cancel pre-orders and you can have it pre-downloaded. Oh, well, technically their policy is not downloaded. Yes, they can revoke it as long as you're connected to the internet. If you, by some chance, downloaded Cyberpunk, have it there, put your system offline, and then seek a refund, you can get away with it. But if you want to connect that system to the internet, soon as it hits the internet, it gets revoked, and then you get a broken image on your console.
Yeah, the closest thing I've ever had to do to get a refund from Sony before is when my system got hacked and somebody bought stuff, and I caught it relatively quick, and I never downloaded it. So they just like removed the keys, you know. Yeah.
They can just basically kill switch any game at any time. But I guess you can circumvent that if you're just like, this is going to be my PT/Cyberpunk 2077 machine, which I don't think anyone would be crazy enough to do.
Right.
I'm wondering, like, retailers are doing the thing where they're letting you return it for 3 days. You have until the 21st to return it. I'm wondering if that will cause some issues with retailers, probably more so with like CD Projekt Red next time they want to put their games in a physical store.
Is this done?
But I think
is it really done? Like really done?
It's like we'll put it in our store after your patches hit. But I think this will change the industry in terms of maybe some back end stuff with Sony and Microsoft, like with the waivers, the day one patch. Yeah. Maybe certification process will add something. Maybe there will be finally a frame rate minimum set to games. Of like, hey, if your shit goes under 12 frames per second, you cannot release this on our store.
Right.
But that's it for that. Let's get into our Game of the Year discussion.
All right. So we each picked 3 games that had the biggest impact on us in 2020. So for me, my number 3 game is Paper Mario Origami King. I picked this up pretty much on a whim. I enjoyed the first Paper Mario that I played on... I don't even remember what I played it on, but and I know that they made some other ones, but for the most part, it's been a long time since I played a Mario game. I had a Switch. I was going to Virginia. It was 10 hours each way, and I was going to, be in Virginia on vacation, during COVID. So we were going to have a little bit of like more downtime. And I picked it up partially because I was like, I can play it in the car, or I can play it at the hotel. And I got hooked by it, and I really enjoyed it. It was fun to get into the Mario world again. The RPG element of it, the turn-based, kind of made me, remember that I like those kind of games, and the story was good. It was, a very typical story, but it's a Mario game, and it's at its core, like just like we just talked about with Cyberpunk, like you buy a Nintendo product, it's going to be pretty damn good.
Yeah, it's going to work.
Yeah,
and it's going to run well on Nintendo hardware, on the hardware it's released on.
So Paper Mario for me. So are we going to go? Am I going to do all 3, or are you going to do yours?
I could do my 3, and we'll just go back and forth.
Okay.
Just because our number 1 appears to be the same. So my number 3 is I had a top 10 list going, and I was like rearranging stuff, and my number 3 has been switched like 5 times today. But Fall Guys is my number 3. Now, does Fall Guys hang like on a technical level with any of the games that we're going to talk about? No. Does Fall Guys have like a deep story? No. Does Fall Guys even really have like, the best mechanics? No. But it is one of the best party games I've played, and party games kind of live in their own bubble, where they don't need to be the best at anything because it's a party game you're going to be playing with your friends. And Fall Guys was one of the best games to come out this year that in quarantine, especially during quarantine, during lockdown was amazing to have. And I spent so many nights to 2-3 in the morning, which I haven't done in years, playing a game with my friends.
Because you didn't have to get up in the morning.
Because I didn't have to get up in the morning. But even then, there was a couple weeks where I was at work. And it was perfect for that. Anyone can play. It was definitely one of those games where some of my friends were like, no, that game looks stupid. But it was a PS Plus game that they downloaded because they had Plus. Mm-hmm. They played it. They loved it. They got obsessed with it. At a certain point, I didn't want to play with them because they would constantly win. But I would still play. And it has a charm to it. The soundtrack is amazing.
Short, quick bursts, you know?
Yes. Mm-hmm. You know, it was definitely short, quick bursts, but it was also one of those games where you would easily be like, you know what, one more game. Mm-hmm. And then one more game. Well, I didn't like the way I died on that one. One more game. And you just keep going and keep going. And it just had a replayability, especially in that first 2 months, that it was just the go-to game.
Yeah, I mean, PS Plus helped it tremendously, but it also sold gangbusters on Steam. I saw some figure. I don't know what it is, but it was ridiculous.
8 million or something crazy.
Yeah, I was like, holy cow, you know.
Yeah. So Fall Guys is my number 3. I didn't expect it to be that high on my list, but thinking back of 2020, Fall Guys is kind of like the perfect game for this year.
Mm-hmm. All right. Number 2 for me was even something that Michael, when we saw it, we were just talking about it, when we saw it at E3, he's like, this is your thing. This is you. You know, and it was, at that time, it was Gods and Monsters, but it's Immortals Phoenix Rising. I got some early time with it, and I really enjoyed it. And it was one of those games that, you know, during the holiday, I think it came out at a terrible time. December is just a terrible time, sandwiched between and maybe Cyberpunk being bad is going to help it, because we are always like,
it could,
you know, and it's already getting the price marked down. If you're listening to this, you can pretty much find Immortals for $40 everywhere, and you should 100% buy it for $40. I was over 30 hours into the game, and I felt like I was beelining the game more than I probably should have been. And it's just great. I really enjoyed it. I know the first 2 games, like I've been talking about, are kind of basic, maybe kiddie games, not, but it's been great to not worry about Owen sitting next to me watching me play. Owen plays Immortals all the time. He sucks at it, but he plays it all the time. And he tried to play Paper Mario. And so I've got a 5-year-old kid, obviously. And so the time that I spend, I need to be a little bit more strategic on some of the games that I play, of what I show him. Do I want to play Cyberpunk where there's a bunch of dildos on the screen while he's watching? Probably not.
They're going to patch those apparently, so there's not as many.
But it's definitely, if you like Zelda games, it's a
balloon animal. Don't worry.
If you like Zelda games, that this has a lot of Zelda in it. It's got a lot, it's from the developers of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So the combat is where I feel like this game shines. The world is cool. I played it on Switch and I played it on PS5. And they both, yes, obviously performance-wise it was better on PS5, but I like the ability to play it on the Switch, and I like the ability that my son can play it on the handheld mode, because with his tiny hands. So it's on everything, and it's definitely something that I truly, truly enjoyed, and I had some frustration with it while I was playing the puzzles, but I think that's. I had to be able to take a step back and think about it the next day, but that's something that maybe I was playing it too long at one time, where normally I would have kind of walked away from it, but I wanted to get through it so that I could, push it over the edge to have it for, to be able to review it, which just comes with the territory of what we do. So.
Oh, is that it?
Yes.
Okay. So my number 2 is a game that I've talked about the last month or two. Is this that game that I play constantly, Hades, specifically Hades on the Switch.
You made me buy, and I still haven't played
yet. I didn't make you buy it, but you'll enjoy it.
I know. Eventually, one day.
Yeah. Hades is one of those games. It's from Supergiant Games, the people that made Bastion, Transistor, Pyre, I think is their other game. It's a roguelike. And it was definitely, I'm not the biggest fan of that genre, but I like Greek mythology. This had a really good art design. People kept talking about like the story and the voice acting are fantastic.
He's not talking about Immortals, but it sounds like he is.
Basically, yeah. But this is, this is a more mature game. It has basically all the drama that if you've like read up on like Greek mythology is very like soap opera-y, like some of the stories. It dives into that. It's got a lot of drama. It's got a lot of character like depth, and just so much of this game is built on its characters, and they built the story and the character development into the mechanics because this is a roguelite. You will die a lot, and there needs to be a reason for you to keep going after you die. And without spoiling it, they found a way to do that where every time you die, you learn just a little bit more about the world, and you want to keep going. Even after you beat the game once, they have a hook. They have a reason for you to keep playing the game again and again. I've beaten this game 12 times, and I'm still getting story bits even after I beat it.
Which is definitely the definition of great writing.
Yes. And there's no crazy cutscenes or anything. It's like, the character pops up on the screen and then you get some dialogue from it, but it's fully voice act. And it's just super intriguing. And it's just like, oh, I just want to learn more. And it's taking stories, like famous stories from the mythology, and just putting its own spin on it. So it's like nothing new if you like read up on like Greek mythology, but their spin on it is so good, and like the art design is amazing. Like I love looking at this game. All the ways they like recreated these Greek gods is so good. And the gameplay is just really addicting. And there's like 6 different weapons that you can choose through, and they have different mutations you can upgrade. I played like 10 of my 12 playthroughs where I beat it with the same bow and arrow because I was just so in love and satisfied with that weapon that I didn't even pay attention to the other weapons until later on, when I'm just like, okay, let me see what the other weapons have. And most of those weapons were really fun to play through. And even though I took a little bit of a break from it, I'm going to get back into it just because it's just something that I can just play on the Switch on the couch while something else is on the TV, or if like Sarah's playing the PlayStation or the Xbox, I can just have the Switch out and I'm playing it, and it works really well on the Switch. Like, I'm afraid to look at my hour count. It might have passed Animal Crossing, which Animal Crossing was at like 50 hours before I gave up on that. So I wasn't expecting this game to hit as much as it did, but it's definitely, it almost dethroned my game of the year that we'll talk about. And I almost just made it my game of the year just so mine and Dave's can differ, because I had an idea where Dave was going with his, and I'm sure you had an idea where mine was going. But Hades is like definitely worthy of being like top 3 or the top pick for most people.
I just want to point out that there are 5 games listed on our lists, and 3 of them are playable on the Switch.
Yep. 3 of them are playable.
So, all right. So we're going to dive into our game of the year. So this is Michael and I's game of the year. We spent an entire Spoilercast episode on this, so we're not going to go too crazy into this. But, much to everybody's surprise, our game of the year is The Division 2 Warlord. No, just The Last of Us 2. So I think, again, it was something that Michael and I made a point. We knew that, this was a big game, and we made a point to say, okay, look, we're both getting this day one. Let's get through this. And this was the only game since DDG has been around that I think that we had the conversation about, where are you at? How far did you get? What spot are you at? What are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
And so when, that conversation's happening between the two of us, of us texting back and forth, you definitely can tell that the game has a significant impact on how we're playing, from a content standpoint, from a creation standpoint, and just from the game standpoint as well. On the heels of Last of Us 1 being highly anticipated, running into a couple of delays, and then delivering their goal. Cyberpunk should take notes.
Yes.
I just, again, like you talked about, writing, storytelling, environment, just gameplay, it all hit. And it hit exactly where it was supposed to, and how it was supposed to, and when it was supposed to. So,
controversies aside, The Last of Us hit everything it wanted to hit. The story had me, from the jump.
First 90 minutes, like the first 60 minutes. I don't remember how long it does or doesn't take, but there's a pivot point in the game, and it's very early.
Yeah. A good movie, a good book, a good TV show, it has the ability to want to portray or want to almost dictate where they want your feelings to go, and I think The Last of Us did a really good job. You're supposed to hate a character like Abby, but if the game does its job, or if you have empathy, by the end of the game, you don't hate Abby. And I feel like that is that's good writing, that's good storytelling. The game didn't just go for a cookie cutter story. It wanted to challenge players, and it did. And some people didn't like what the game had, and that's fine. But damn, did that game make people feel, whether they feel like they hated it or feel like they loved it. This got people talking, and I loved every minute of it. And I haven't had a game, a single player game, that just completely took me over like it did. I played Hades after this. Mm-hmm. But it'd been a long stretch since I had a game that had me hooked and had me feeling a bunch of different array of emotions.
Come home from work, you want to play it, you want to see how it goes. Or you just kept chugging through because you didn't chug through because you had to. You kept playing because you wanted to. You wanted to see what was next, what was the next cutscene, what was the next area, what was going to happen. Yeah. And then at the halfway point of the game, when another pivot point happens, you're like, okay, are they really going to do this? And we're really going to do this? So, and then as you're playing through it, after that pivot point, you realize what's going on, and you're like, oh,
no, because there's a lot of moments in this game where I haven't felt like this for a game, where I'm physically playing it, but I don't want to do the actions that the game is telling me to do because I'm just not ready for the results of what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I tend to have probably more feelings when I'm playing a game than Dave does. But not saying you're robotic, Dave, or anything, but you know what I mean. I tend to have different feelings towards the game when I'm playing, but I felt so many different emotions, genuine anger, genuine sadness, moments of joy, everything about this game just was great.
Those moments for me don't happen necessarily while I'm actually playing. They more happen after I've played something and I'm thinking about it more later. That's when I kind of have that functionality to it.
But I don't know about you, but so I was playing the game and Sarah was watching. When I would put the controller down, we still talked about the game after we were playing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just played the game, enjoyed the game, moved on with our lives. It was played the game, enjoyed the game, and let's talk about the game for a little bit after playing.
Definitely. My wife and I have definitely had, even the rest of this year, my wife and I have had conversations about it.
Yeah. And that's rare for a video game. Usually I play a game, and outside of this podcast, once I play the game, I'll talk about it on this podcast, but I'm not going to talk about the game with my friends that often, or my coworkers, or even Sarah. Once we play a game, we kind of just close that book on that game and move mm-hmm. on. But this one, to this day, if I see concept art or fan art on Twitter while scrolling, I immediately will get a thought.
Yeah.
Of a moment in a game, and just the discussions it forced people to have about certain things in the game, I feel were important, and this is going to be a lasting game that you're going to think about. This is going to be one of the best games on PS4 that mm-hmm. released, which is already a stacked list of like top games on PS4, but this immediately was just like slotting itself into like the top of that conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
After several years of that console being out and having great games. So that's all I have to say about it. We have a whole spoiler cast, which even though it's like, is it like 3 hours long?
It's long. It's
cast?
2 at least. So
yeah, I think we didn't even cover everything that we wanted to cover, because I think when we were doing that, at one point we were like 90 minutes in, and I think you mentioned like we're only on day 2. You know, like there's so much stuff that we could have covered in that game. But yeah, I could talk about this game endless.
2 hours
forever.
and 43 minutes at least. So.
Yeah. And even then, I remember after we recorded, I was like, shit, I didn't mention this.
All right. Briefly, I know you have it on here. Like, do you have a biggest surprise game? The thing, my guess for you would be Hades.
Yeah, it would be Hades, because like Fall Guys, I knew I was going to love it when I saw it at E3.
Yeah.
Tony Hawk was a surprise that it was good, but it was Tony Hawk. It was really hard for them to mess up. So I think, Hades would probably be that. Though I will say, like, The Last of Us is kind of surprising because I wasn't expecting the amount of hate it got.
Okay.
I wasn't expecting, especially after a lot of the stuff was spoiled and people knew going into it what was going to happen, but a lot of those spoilers were misdirected and didn't have context around them. But I'm surprised at all the hate. Like when you load up a tweet from PlayStation about FIFA, and there's just people just still angry about The Last of Us. It just kind of blows my mind. But do you have a surprise game or something you weren't expecting to enjoy?
It's Immortals. I think I knew, like, I didn't know exactly what it was at first, and then like even my first initial preview of what I thought it was going to be, and then what it turned out to be were completely different. You know, in terms of, I didn't expect the scope of it to be as, you know, everybody's like, it's a Ubisoft game, it's going to be open world and have all this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, but this one seems like it's trying to tell a really cool story, and I think it's linear. And everybody else was right and I was wrong. So that, you know, I was what I was hoping it was going to be was an 8 to, you know, or a 10 to 15 hour cool story with some, you know, fun combat, and what I got was a 30+ hour open world game that also has additional content coming for it in the future. So you know, like is that content gonna be good? I have no idea. It's interesting and cool that it's an option. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say we did ask the listeners in the Facebook group and Twitter if you want to just bang through these and talk about what they picked for that. I think I put a decent amount of those. So, not everyone was put on there.
Yeah. But there's definitely a thread on Facebook if you want to be part of the conversation. You can also tweet at us, you know, reply to the tweet. But there's a pretty good, you know, our Facebook group is very interactive. There's lots of conversations going on in there, so you should check it out. So Kale Stevens, for him, Destiny 2 Beyond Light. They made some welcome changes. We've come a long way since 2017. Still more changes to be made. Or still more changes to be made, however. So I tend to agree, but it's, you know, Destiny is just a game that's there for me now. It's always going to be there. It's great. I enjoy it, but it can't be something that holds any of that kind of weight to me. It's just like, it's like your favorite t-shirt can't be your t-shirt of the year. Yeah.
It's a Netflix now.
Yeah.
It's a looter Netflix.
Yep. Sean Church, he writes, definitely Last of Us 2. That was one of the most thorough experiences I've ever had gaming. I experienced the entire range of emotions. It also took a character I was bound and determined to hate and ended up falling in love with. A little weird, Sean, that you're like falling in love with a video game character, but we'll talk about that offline. No,
hey, you know what? Who doesn't want to be held by Abby and protected?
Suplex by Abby. Raider 81, Last of Us 2 is my game of the year. Last of Us Story is probably one of my favorites of all time. And my daughter Zoe was almost named Ellie because of my love for that story. Hey, that's my daughter's name too. And then he we'll add that to the next show. So Randy Sprouse, Last of Us 2, he said, but he thinks Ghost of Tsushima and Destiny 2 are very, very close second and third. Ben Warren, Gears of War Tactics and Among Us. And Among Us is kind of something that's similar to the Fall Guys thing. You know, like Among Us. I have. You can get into like a little bit of a technicality with Among Us being Game of the Year 2020 because it didn't come out in 2020. But at the same time, you can't deny the impact that it had on it. But that's also, I feel like that's an impact with COVID as well. It's something that definitely shined a light during all that. Main Terry, he writes in our group, don't know if you guys have an indie games category for the episode, but if so, it would definitely be like he would like to shout out 3 indie standouts: Hyper Parasite, No Straight Roads, and Twin Breakers. I briefly got some time with No Straight Roads at E3, and I did enjoy that. I have not had a chance to pick that up as the full release. So, Tom Sands, he writes, Miles, as in Miles Morales for him, just got around to playing Peter Spider-Man this year, and he loves them both. Tim Paulian, for me, it's Ghost of Tsushima. The story is good, the combat is immersive, and made me want to go and pick a fight. And the graphics are amazing. Very few loading screens. Also, the Legends multiplayer is freaking fun. They're also doing some more skin stuff for that multiplayer, so they're really digging deep into that. So,
yeah, which is nice to see.
Yeah. Andis Tabori, I hope I'm saying your name right. I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm not. Ghost of Tsushima, immersive, excellent storytelling, and a gorgeous world. All worth a look. And what? No. Yeah, so Andis writes Ghost of Tsushima, the immersive, excellent storytelling, and a gorgeous world. So,
okay.
Yeah. So as always, like, thank you guys for the feedback. You can send us any of those things. You can send us questions. Hashtag AskDigitalDays. You can post in the Facebook group things that you would think would be good conversation topics for us on the show. And please, if you haven't already, like, just tweet at us or go on that Facebook post. I pinned it as an announcement, so that'll be up there for a little while, of letting us know what your game of the year for 2020 was, and as well as what you're most looking forward to in 2021, which will be what we'll discuss on episode 61. So I hope that everyone has a great week, great holidays. If you're listening to this right the week it comes out, Merry Christmas if that's what you celebrate. Happy Hanukkah, happy holidays. And we will talk to you guys next week. Keep moving forward.
Yep. Have a safe holiday. But yeah, don't be a dick to retail employees if you're doing last second shopping today. See ya.